It's certainly a recurring theme that I would see with some researchers. You do become very tied into this particular identity that is linked to your research. And so it's really hard to understand what it might be like in a different environment.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. This week, my guest is another Sarah. I'm talking to Sarah Ashworth, researcher developer at the University of Manchester and freelance research careers consultant. Sarah was one of the podcast's earliest and most enthusiastic fans, so I'm delighted to be able to turn the tables and invite her to share her story. As you'll hear, Sarah's pivot from microbiology to careers came from taking the time to really understand her own skills and grabbing any development opportunity that came along. Having tried a number of careers-related roles, she settled on supporting researchers as it means that she can keep learning every single day. She is also perfectly placed to help researchers struggling to imagine a future outside of academia because she has walked that same path. Listen on to hear her story. Welcome along, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on as a guest to the podcast. I wonder if we could begin our conversation by hearing a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for asking me, Sarah. So I'm based at the University of Manchester and I've held a number of roles here at this institution. And I've been based here since I finished my PhD in 2003. And all the roles that I've held have been related to researcher development or careers. So my current role is as a researcher developer. I'm sitting in a central division at the University of Manchester. And as in that role, I'm part of a team who provide training and career guidance for doctoral students, research staff, and we also support those who are supervising or line managing those researchers as well. But alongside my role at the University of Manchester, I also run my own career and professional development consultancy, where I work with some individuals, but mostly other institutions to provide either training or one-to-one guidance for researchers.
Fantastic. Oh, well, I think the first thing I'm really interested to hear is that you said you've been at Manchester since you finished your PhD.
Yep.
Was it in this kind of role or have you gone through some different roles? What's been your journey to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so my PhD was looking at the breakdown of plastic in the environment by microorganisms. So I'm a microbiologist by training. And I'd come from industry, so I'd already had a job in the pharmaceutical industry when I came into my PhD. And my plan was to go back. But over the course of the PhD, I changed my mind, decided that really I'd probably quite like to do something that was a bit more people-based. I felt like I'd spent enough time looking at Petri dishes for those microbiologists in the audience. And I was actually looking to get into environmental consultancy because I thought, well, that links in with the breakdown of plastic. And it was a suggestion from my supervisor. So actually that was, I got some really good careers advice there from my supervisor who recognised some of my skill set and how that might be used in different ways. And so to gain some experience, because I didn't have a lot of relevant experience in that sector, I was volunteering for a charity, an environmental charity, after I'd finished and done my Viva and everything else and was looking for a job. And I was working with small and medium-sized businesses to try and help them improve their environmental performance. So involved going to small businesses and sort of looking at their energy usage, how people travel to work, that sort of thing, to try and sort of look at their what would now be called carbon footprint. And during that, we did quite a lot of career development work. So I'd done quite a bit of career development during my PhD, but it's the penny finally dropped when I was doing that particular set of courses. And I started looking at the skills that I had and the skills that I wanted to use. And so I applied for a job that was a project management job within the careers service at the University of Manchester. And my motivation when I took that job was really as a stopgap. It was going to be until I found a job in environmental consultancy. And what that job was managing the Northwest hub of what was then called UK Grad. It's now called VTI, which is the UK Research and Development Organisation. And I was working with all the different universities in the Northwest of England to help provide support for PhD student career development at that point. And I found I really loved the job. So a stopgap sort of became something that I really enjoyed. And being based in the careers service, I sort of started to develop my careers consultancy skills. So sort of learned how to do CV reviews, and then sat in and learned how to do one-to-one appointments. Did a lot of training and development on how to train and how to teach. So quite a lot of professional development there. So I did a course that was looking at how good practice in training and development. From there, I then moved into a position in one of the faculties. So I moved actually back into the faculty where I'd done my PhD, which was the Faculty of Life Sciences. And for 7.5 years, I managed the programme of career and professional development support for research staff. So they hadn't had anyone in that role before, which was a bit like the role I'd had in the careers service. Both of them had been pretty brand new projects, or perhaps someone had just started it and I was building it up. But this was a brand new project. So I sort of built it up from scratch, and I worked alongside someone who was doing something very similar for the PhD student training. And during that 7.5 years, I had 2 children. I also did trained to become a coach. So I did a coaching qualification. And after about 7.5 years, I decided I wanted to do something perhaps a little bit different. So I moved into the careers service. So I took a sideways move to be a career consultant, and then stayed there again for 7.5 years. But it was at that point I set up my consultancy, because I was moving away. By moving into the careers service, I wasn't just focusing on researchers. I was working with all students right across the board here at Manchester. And I really love working with researchers. And luckily, there were some people who still wanted me to work with researchers, even though I was moving out of that area. And so I started my consultancy in order to be able to take advantage of opportunities where people had asked me to come and do work for them to fill gaps which were existing in their internal support. And so then I stayed in that job for another 7 years.
It's a bit of a pattern.
Bit of a pattern here. Yeah, bit of a pattern. And then they rearranged how researcher development was managed here at the University of Manchester, and I saw a position come up and decided to apply for that, because my ideal job is to be a careers consultant for research staff, and I think this is the closest job that Manchester has to it. So, which is what I said in my interview, and so I've been in this role since April last year. So getting on for 18 months now.
So it sounds like once you found the direction you wanted to go in, you just took those, steps and opportunities to get towards it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary, really, Sarah. Yeah, I didn't imagine at the end of my PhD, or even when I was looking for work, that this is what I was going to do. As I say, it was sort of I think the careers term is planned happenstance. Yes. So I was thinking about what skill sets I wanted to use and where my strengths were. And I thought, working with people, managing projects, those are 2 things which I enjoy doing. And so I saw a job come up and thought, well, I'll give that a try.
Yeah. Oh, and here you are now. It also sounds like you're somebody who really enjoys learning yourself as well. You've talked a lot about all the training opportunities that you've taken advantage of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you work in training and development, that's, you are always learning. So, I think my children get sick of listening to me saying every day is a learning day. Every day is a learning day. It's a great day if I can learn something new every single day. So that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy being in a university environment, because obviously everybody's always about the learning. So doing training and development within a learning organisation just means that you're always learning. So it's certainly something I enjoy.
And I think with research as well, that's something that's always developing as well, isn't it? There's always new projects and things like that coming along.
Yeah.
So do you do the things, just so I understand, that you've got the research developer stuff and the career consulting? Are they both things you do in Manchester, or is the career consulting like a sort of independent thing?
It's a good question. So it started off primarily both at Manchester. So I was working part-time as a careers consultant, mostly focused on working with undergraduate students, but all students. And then I was an internal consultant, if you like, to work with staff in one of the faculties. So it was actually the faculty I'd left. The person who'd taken over my role didn't come from a careers background and said, actually, could we buy in some of your time to come and do that for us, rather than, because I don't have that experience. They had a different skill set. So I started off internally, working at Manchester, but over time I've worked for other institutions, either doing something similar, offering one-to-one appointments, or offering workshops, which might be for things like PhD student away days or research group away days, those sorts of things. Yeah, so that's sort of how it developed. Initially, the internal consultancy was all managed internally within the university, but once I started working for other institutions, I needed to establish a business, which I did.
Yeah, and how do you juggle those two things? I imagine there's some conflicting opportunities sometimes.
Yes, sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge. I think it was clearer when I worked in careers, because the careers department within the University of Manchester has no remit for staff. So anything to do with staff was absolutely fine, because there's no remit within the institution. But certainly from a point of transparency, within the university, we have something called a register of interests. So I register the fact that I have my own consultancy, and I have to declare to the university everybody who I'm working with. So formally, that's how it works. From a point of view of how I manage different elements, I've done more consultancy when I've been more part-time. So for a number of years, 3 days a week to fit in with when my children were younger. And now they're getting older and more independent. Took on more consultancy, and now I've taken on more hours at Manchester, and I do slightly less consultancy. So it's something which I've been lucky that I've been able to allow to ebb and flow to the work-life balance that I wanted, really.
Yeah, well, that does sound like a nice balance. And is it something that the university, like managers at the university, have been supportive of?
Yes. So I've always been very transparent and upfront with the team that I'm working with and the team that I'm working, to say, this is what I'm doing. And even when when I've moved positions and I've started new jobs, I've explained, actually, I do have my own consultancy. I do this work. Is that going to cause any conflict of interest or be any problem? And it's usually
it's
fine.
Great that they've been supportive of that. Fantastic. Well, lots to draw on, but I wonder if maybe you'd like to tell us about a couple of things you've done that you're really proud of.
Things that I'm really proud of. So when I saw this question, I was thinking, goodness, how do you answer this? And I think for me, I've separated it into personal and work, because although the two are very much intertwined, so I think for me personally, I think I'm quite pleased with the role model that I can be for my children. So I have a son and a daughter, and I'm always looking to make sure that I balance my work and my family commitments. And I hope that I've shown them how you can be a working professional and still be present for your family and other commitments, and still be able to do other things. From a work point of view, I mean, my best day in work is when I open one of these emails where I've done perhaps helped somebody with their application or done a practice interview, and you open the emails and they're saying, I've got the job or I've got an interview. In fact, I just opened an email just before recording this session that says, I've got that job I was applying for, I've got an interview, can we do a practice, which was brilliant. So that's always a really good day for me. Or people come along, they say, I was awarded that fellowship, or, and that's really why I do what I do, is to support others in their journeys and sort of take a small part in helping them along the way. Another thing, so I mean, that's sort of a day-to-day, I guess, something that I particularly enjoy. But if I was to focus on one particular thing, I think when I was working in the Faculty of Life Sciences, I tried for a long time to get recognition for postdoctoral staff who were teaching. And probably about a year before I finished in that role, we were able to secure that recognition. And that was something that, it wasn't just me. I was working with a whole team of academic staff and professional services staff to try and make sure that we could get the recognition that they deserved. And we managed to just before I finished, we managed to put in place Higher Education Academy Fellowship recognition, which was something that was really, I was just like, yay, we've managed it, because it had been a long time in the coming and lots of meetings and lots of committees. So it was just brilliant to actually see it come to fruition.
Nice. Lots of little glimmers of satisfaction there. I can imagine how lovely it must be to get that feedback of people like, yeah, you really helped, I did this, and see people go off and develop and grow. That's fantastic. I am sure, though, however, no job is without its challenges. So what sort of hurdles have you had to overcome in your journey?
Yeah, so again, thinking about this question, I've separated it into both personal and work hurdles. And I think personally, quite early on in my journey, so when I transitioned from being a researcher into more of a professional services role, I think imposter syndrome was really part of my challenge. I was coming from a grounding as a specialist. I was a microbiologist. I knew who I was. I knew my area. And then I was going into something completely different. But I was still coming with that researcher mindset of I have to be a specialist. And so it really felt quite difficult when I was perhaps meeting with associates, vice presidents for research to talk to them about what we should be, the vision for supporting PhDs in their institution. And I'm thinking, I've got no idea what we should be doing, because I was coming at it with that mindset. And it took me some time to understand that perhaps I could have this dual identity, that I could be a researcher, I could be a biologist, but I could also be a professional in a different sphere as well, not necessarily without that full academic background. So now when people ask me, what do? I say, well, I trained as a biologist, but I work as a researcher developer. And so I've sort of made peace with that dual identity. And it's certainly a recurring theme that I will see with some researchers in one-to-one appointments, so people you do become very tied into this particular identity that is linked to your research. And so it's really hard to understand what it might be like in a different environment. So I'm particularly mindful of trying to help people understand how they can envisage themselves in different environments. If I can see some of that familiarity of, how could I possibly be anything but a biologist? So yes, I guess that was quite a personal challenge, but I think some part of the challenge facing me within working within research and development is, I guess, sometimes persuading people within the institution that actually research and development is important, particularly for research staff. I think people are largely brought round to the idea for PhD students. After all, it's a period of training, and so adding in career and professional development training is a natural part of that. But I think sometimes people think, well, for staff members, they should be just getting on with the job that they're paid to do. But so it's just, again, sometimes it's just pushing back sometimes on viewpoints that perhaps aren't as supportive, and sort of trying to negotiate with people and encourage them to think about how it could be of value both to them and to the people who are within the research groups.
I think in some ways those two things tie together as well. This idea of, as a researcher, you are an expert in something, and therefore you already know everything that you need to know. Yes. I think it's interesting. I had the conversation more than once with people that I find it interesting that universities, the reason for existing is as places of learning and development, and then sometimes that doesn't always apply to the staff. Not maybe it's just the students. Certainly I think not a challenge that you're facing alone there, that one. No. Yeah. So, as I think I like to ask all of my guests what they would do if they had a magic wand and they could change something about the world that they work in, and the bounds of possibility were no limit. So what have you chosen?
So what I've chosen is one of the conversations that's been being had at least since I've been in this arena of research and development, is to wave my magic wand and to have enough funding that people don't have to have fixed term contracts anymore. Because I think that's one of the really, really difficult positions that our professional researchers find themselves in, to be in the top 1 or 2% of most educated people within a country, but still not having a fixed term contract. Because having that, it's not so much, not having a permanent contract, being on a fixed term contract. because I think it makes such an impact on the decisions that you make about your career, about your life, that actually if everybody could just have a permanent position or a permanent contract, then they could have the freedom and the flexibility to think about their careers and their lives in a very different way. So yeah, I think it's a very difficult structural issue within academic research careers, but anything's possible with a magic wand. So
it is a magic wand, absolutely. So yeah, and there is precedent there. You would not be the first person who has asked to do away with fixed term contracts and replace it with some sense of rolling contracts, continuity. Yeah, and I'm sure research universities are full of, there's business departments with some of the best business minds in the world. Surely they could figure something out. But...
Yes. We're still working on it.
So I wonder, to anybody who is thinking of following in your footsteps, this is probably something that comes up every day. What sort of advice you give people? Maybe what's your top piece of advice to anybody thinking about their career development?
Yeah, so, I think in my experience, most researcher developers come from research careers. So most of them have been researchers, not 100% of them, but probably the vast majority that I've met. So I guess my top tip would be build relevant skills. How might you do that? You could organise a local career event or training session. You could contact your local researcher development or careers team to see if they want any input into training. I imagine they would bite your hand off. I certainly would. If someone approached me and said, "Oh, do you want any feedback on training?" I'd be like, "Yes, come and help." And you can get involved by talking about your career to other people. For example, lots of schools, particularly secondary schools, have panel sessions. You can get involved in doing those, or even look for what training opportunities might be available within your institution. So I know, for example, here at Manchester for staff and for students, we offer coaching courses. So again, just a short half day taster into what coaching might be like can give you some of the skills that you might need in these types of roles. So I think there's loads of opportunities. And actually what you'll probably find is that if you talk to people in research and development or in careers, the types of people they're usually more than happy to try and help people, because actually that's what their job is for anyway. So yeah, I would definitely recommend getting some relevant experience and talking to people who are already doing the job and getting them on your side to help you too.
That sounds like excellent advice. Thank you very much. And and just thinking then, as we wrap up our conversation, if anybody would like to get in touch with you, whether it's to know more about the kind of work you do or use your consultancy services or anything, what's the best place for people to find you?
Well, professionally, I tend to live on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. I look pretty much like this in my picture. And yeah, it's Sarah Ashworth. Also, Sarah R. Ashworth is the suffix at the end of my LinkedIn profile.
Excellent. I'll put a link in the show notes, and then I'm sure people will be able to track you down from there. So it just remains to say thank you so much for taking the time to come along and have a chat. And it's been really great to hear about your career.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links under the episode to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the Research Adjacent Roundup newsletter. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.